Hello everyone, back for another update. I'm currently on the Allegheny Trail between the Raptor Observatory and the Appalachian Trail Junction. Heading back, Raptor Observatory is closed, cannot go into it due to structural problems with it. However, you still can hike to where it is. Of course, it's along the trail, but you cannot go into the structure anymore until they refurbish it, whenever that might be. Now I am on the Allegheny Trail. I just turned around. I'm heading back toward the trailhead for the Raptor Observatory. Again, this is officially part of the Allegheny Trail, a 311-mile trail. That goes from the Appalachian Trail Junction, probably about 7 or 8 miles south of here, to the PA line. 311-mile trail. That again is a spur trail off the Appalachian Trail. So, yesterday on my way back, I did see a bear. One of those usual encounters where they just pop up out of nowhere and run off, out of sight. I was probably about 50 to 100 feet away from it, and it took off, disappeared pretty quick once it saw me. But getting back to what I'm talking about here, providing another update on this tropical system in the Caribbean. There's a lot of talk of it coming to Category 5 or stalling for days on end, dumping 50 inches of rain on Hispaniola. What we have to realize here is, if it were not for technology, this storm would be dispersed within 24 hours or less. It's totally a propped up system right now. They're shooting every bit of energy into it from their satellites to try to get it going into a hurricane and get it over the threshold to where explosive development will occur. So far, they have not managed to reach this point with it. They're for 24 hours straight, they've been firing every bit of energy they got available to try to get this system up to a Cat 5 hurricane. They desperately need another hurricane for this season. We've been way below average. I know people may think I'm crazy for saying it's manufactured and it would be gone in 24 hours if the satellites were eliminated right now and it was left up to nature. But the heat content in the Caribbean, despite all the talk of record warm temperatures, is BS, because if it really was that warm, this storm would have took off a long time ago and developed into something huge even before it got to the Caribbean. If the waters are really as warm as they're saying they are, which I feel that the heat content in the Caribbean is marginal right now to even support a hurricane, because of all the manipulation that's been done. A lot of the deeper heat content has been removed from these areas. And they're thinking, well, if this storm stalls, it's going to become a Cat 5. Well, where is it going to become? How is it going to become a Cat 5 if the heat content is not there to support a storm of that strength? If it sits over a particular area, it's going to suck up all the heat in that area. I mean, they may, for a time, get it up to a major hurricane. If they get lucky and this thing manages to find a warmer patch of water, to where they could get the motor going on it. They're trying to get the motor. They are spraying all kinds of ether right now into it, trying to get it to start. Why is it not starting right away? Because there's not enough heat content, not enough gas. If you use the analogy, not enough gas to get the motor going. Right away, at least. And this supports what I've been saying. We are near the threshold where there's not going to be any more hurricanes. We're close. The reason why, only reason we got the Cat 5s, well, they claim Cat 5s. I doubt if they actually were. I'll call them major hurricanes. They did look like they could be major hurricanes on the images. The only reason that happened this year is, as I explained, once they get the motor going, they don't have to feed that much more energy into it to get it up to a major status. Because once it gets up over the threshold, it can start sustaining itself, taking additional heat out of the water, sucking it up. And then they only have to add a little bit more additional energy to pump it up to a Cat 5 or a major status. I don't know if they actually could get it to a Cat 5, but to turn it into something that they can call a major hurricane. Cat 5s are extremely rare, and I don't feel that man can create a Cat 5 storm right now. They call it a Cat 5. But even if they manage to get it up to a major status, I say get it up because naturally it would never happen. With the heat content lacking as much as it is to get a storm to even get going naturally, it would not be happening naturally. But even if they manage to manufacture this, get the motor going, it's going to be hard to keep it at a Cat 5 for very long, especially if it stalls. It's going to suck all the heat right out of that water, and it's going to kill it eventually. To the north of Hispaniola, we've already had several storms move by there. The heat is used up. Once it gets up beyond the islands, it's going to likely, even if it got going, it would fall apart pretty quick. Not only for that reason, but because there's a huge trough over the North Atlantic that's going to rip it to shreds once it gets north of the Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. But so far up to the point where they have not gotten the motor going on this. There's all kinds of talk. It's definitely going to be a hurricane. I would say it's not even a tropical storm at this point. In spite of the impressive look, the only reason it looks impressive is because they're bombing this thing, like I said earlier, with all kinds of energy. And in times past, when they first started doing this, this would have definitely gotten it going, but it's still not going after 24 hours of... I mean, it's not hard to tell it's artificial. Just look at the images. Do a sequence, a time sequence. And just imagine a beam hitting the center of that cloud mass of energy, exploding outward from it. This is not natural convection that's happening in this system. It's so obvious. It's fake. It's artificially being done. There's a nice view off to the side of the ridge line. However, one thing mankind cannot do, and that's pretty obvious from what happened this year, is they cannot steer these storms. Look at this opening in this tree. They cannot steer hurricanes. If they were able to see what the goal is of this manipulation game, they want every tropical disturbance coming off Africa, every single tropical disturbance, they want to manufacture and turn it into a Cat 5 hurricane. That's their goal. They would love to see every disturbance become a Cat 5 hurricane and hit the U.S. and thoroughly convince people that global warming, but man cannot do that. They can only manufacture a storm if the conditions are almost just right for one to begin with. And they cannot really steer it either. They can try to create the MJO to make it favorable for a landfall, but they can't totally control where the subtropical highs that steer these storms set up. They cannot control that totally. They can only control the positioning of the jet stream to some extent, to position the jet stream in such a way that maybe it could suck a storm up toward the U.S. But there's no guarantee it's going to work. It did work with Helene, but they got lucky. They got lucky with Helene. I hate to say lucky, but their goal is to convince everybody, brainwash everybody into global warming being caused by man. The narrative is that global warming causes more hurricanes, more destruction, and that's all we got to look forward to in the future. From 2007 on, hurricanes began to decrease frequency, landfalls, because the climate turned the corner about that time, from warming to cooling, natural warming to natural cooling. And the symptoms of that were less hurricanes, less landfalls, colder, snowier winters starting to return. And people would joke, well, yeah, right, this is really global warming. New York City is buried under a foot and a half of snow. Yeah, right. And they felt that they had to do something about all this. And that is when they developed the technology to try to create more hurricanes, try to create milder winters for places like New York City artificially, to shut these people up that are saying, see, look, New York City got a foot of snow today. Well, yeah, like there's really global warming going on. I remember all the joking going on. But man cannot control, the strength of the subtropical highs that set up around the world. They can't control. That's modulated by the sun and level of activity on the sun. Man cannot control that. It's large-scale weather features that vary from year to year. Solar activity is declining. We are over the max. We're starting to slide off into the next minimum. which means less heat getting put into the oceans to replenish what they're taking out. To manufacture these storms, it takes an enormous amount of extra heat out of the ocean. So when that threshold is reached, we're not going to get any more hurricanes anymore. And they're going to try like they've been doing to manufacture them, and their efforts are going to fail. And this year they did fail. Up to the end of September, they only managed to get one hurricane going. That was Aaron. Other than that, they were not able to get anything going till the very last week of September. And by then, historically, we're past the peak of activity. But by then, perhaps, there might have been a couple patches of water in the Atlantic just warm enough to sustain a hurricane, or get one going at least, with help. But this is a truthful statement. We are close to where in the Atlantic at least these storms are going to disappear for a long period of time, perhaps. Because it's an overdraft on the heat balance for the Atlantic. It's an overdraft. Every time they manufacture a hurricane, it's an overdraft out of the bank account for the heat. It's an overdraft. You know what I mean? Meaning that it's going to take an extra amount of heat beyond what's normally replenished to get it back up to where it was. The heat in the Caribbean, though, is lacking overall. It's pretty obvious it's lacking. This storm would have developed yesterday or the day before into something huge already. With the amount of energy they're shooting into it, if it still hasn't gotten going, it's either not going to develop into anything, or they might get lucky and it hits a patch of warmer water somewhere in the Caribbean that might get it over the threshold enough to where it could explode into something major. But so far, I have not yet seen that happening. There's no sign it's going to happen. They're shooting everything at all kinds of energy. It's not going anywhere, at least up till now. If it's not a hurricane by tomorrow, the amount of energy they're shooting into that system, if it's not a hurricane by tomorrow, each day it fails to become a hurricane, there's less of a probability it's going to be anything significant. We're talking by tomorrow. If it's not a hurricane, that means the heat content in the Caribbean is totally lacking. But it is lacking. The fact that it's still not a hurricane yet, it's lacking. With all the help this system's getting, it still hasn't caught on. Of course, this flies in the face of what so many people are saying about the Caribbean being record warm. Oh, the oceans are record warm right now. I just don't see evidence of that being true. The oceans were warm back in 2005. That's why we got so many storms that year. Naturally got so many storms because the oceans were indeed warm. But they've been overdrawing on the ocean's heat content for the last 10 years in the Atlantic Basin. Now they're starting to do it more in the Pacific because they're trying to get the global ACE up. It's been below average for a number of years now. But the Atlantic, they have over the last decade nearly, the last 9 years, they have overdrawn on the bank account of heat in the Atlantic year after year, creating storms and drawing extra heat out of the water. In doing so, and overdrawing on the bank account of heat in the Atlantic. Eventually, it's going to hit them in the face. But that's the tendency of man. The tendency of man is to overdraw. Whether it's an actual bank account, whether it's a heat balance of the oceans, whether it's driving in a car, you go over the speed limit all the time, you can't handle going within the speed limit, you exceed the speed limit by as much as you can get. It's just the tendency of man to do this sort of shit. To overdraw, to go over the speed limit, to go over on your bank account, go into debt. It's just the tendency of man to do this. And it's the same thing with what I'm talking about. They are overdrawing on the Earth's heat balance, taking more heat out of the oceans, thinking they can get away with it forever. I'm telling you, it's going to hit them in the face, and we're nearing the point where it's going to. We did not have any storms this year until the end of September. Last year, it was the third week of September. We didn't have any storms, and they got lucky last year because the sun got very active in May of last year, put enough heat into the water naturally, where it staved off this point of no return on hurricanes, perhaps for another year or two. If the sun goes toward a minimum next year could be the year where we don't see anything at all in the Atlantic. It could be. If not, it could only be a couple of years away. That maybe next year it will go to October 1st before they can get anything going. It might go all the way to the end of September next year. And it's likely going to mean another drought for the eastern U.S. because, as I said before, rainfall in late summer, early fall in the eastern U.S. comes from tropical systems that round the subtropical high and come up from the Gulf or off the Atlantic in some cases. Even if they're not actual hurricanes, the moisture from these systems is what helps the eastern U.S. get their rainfall in late summer and early fall. So to recap, this Melissa storm, it doesn't become a hurricane by tomorrow. Unless it moves to a warmer patch of water somewhere, it's probably not going to amount to much. I mean, it should have been a hurricane by today, given the amount of energy they've been shooting into that thing. But it still hasn't. So I'm now starting down off this peak in the ridge, and I think it's close to 4,000 feet in elevation, which is why the leaves are all gone. I'm up pretty high right now. As I head back toward the Raptor Observatory, which I think is about 3,500 in elevation above sea level, feet. Meters, I think it's 1,300 meters. But we'll just have to wait and see on Melissa. I mean, I'm not ruling out it could become a Cat 5, or I wouldn't say Cat 5 major. I don't think it's going to ever be a Cat 5, although they might claim it is. But if they get really lucky and this thing manages to find a warmer patch of water and they get the motor going, they might be able to turn it into something major, but it's a maybe. It's not a definite at this point. And after full 24 hours of shooting the storm with as much energy as they've been, it still hasn't, the motor still hasn't started. I mean, maybe it will sometime tonight, maybe it won't. It's hard to say. I can only say with near certainty that the system is being manipulated by technology. They desperately need another hurricane. This is a good possibility. This is the last chance they're going to get this season. I doubt if there's going to be much activity in November. The weather's going to get very volatile across the country next month. It's highly unlikely it's going to be the type of pattern that's going to support anything tropical for very long. That is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this walk along the Allegheny Trail. Up here the leaves are about gone. Still a little bit of residual color, but pretty much it's almost winter leaf conditions up here. I'll be back soon.